Uh, I welcome everyone to our University of Minnesota and North Dakota State University Sheep and Goat Marketing webinar here in the end of March 2022. And so we've got a great team, and you'll see some of those as panelists that help out to pull this together. And hopefully they will, again, work to coordinate some of the questions. Just some points of information as we have some questions. Feel free to put those in the chat box. And in fact, we've got tremendous participation as we're crossing nearly 150 participants. And so feel free to raise your hand if you wish to add to some of the discussion. And so we do have some talented panelists, but at least the way I designed it and kind of the way our team at the University of Minnesota Sheep and Goat Group pulled together is that we want this to be a panel and some discussion that we can all talk about and kind of think about where we have some options for our sheep and goat programming world as well. And so a couple different things here is that I just want to kind of lay a little bit of the groundwork that we have for our for our marketing webinar that we're going to have this evening. And so with just a little bit of background information and our sheep and goat marketing options. And in fact, we have more information. This is a graph that was actually updated with our 2020 information. We'll certainly shortly have the 2021 graph, but for the most part, just the sheep industry stays a little bit stagnant to going down just a little bit in some places regionally. But we'll be able to talk more in terms of supply and demand and how that has an impact. But certainly we're not on the growth basis yet. And in fact, some of these marketing and the prices that we have, particularly in kind of our cull-use options, is making a change for us as well. So some of the information, again, we'll talk about our sheep industry. And this is a picture that I took that represents at least more of our stakeholders. My name is Dr. Travis Hoffman. I serve as the sheep extension specialist for both the state of North Dakota and also for Minnesota. And so these were lambs that were on a previous project that were originating from Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And a lot of those more speckle-faced lambs, but some that are black-faced, some that are white-faced, and each and all that are in between. And of course, as we think about it now and talk about different regional aspects, is that there's also some that are hair sheep breeds that are changing a little bit of our marketplace as well. So there's not quite as much information out there just in relation to our goat markets and our goat market reports, but I think that it's certainly important. And in fact, as we know, nearly half of our listeners and attendees are more goat focused. And so we'll have some that of our webinars that are more sheep focused, some that are more goat. And so we hope that we can answer all those questions for our diverse audience. This is some pictures that I took, in fact, of some goats that were in Texas at a commercial feed yard. And so they also come in all shapes and sizes. In fact, in terms of breed recognition, there's some differences. And we've talked in previous webinars about primarily the difference in selection criteria of selection 1, 2, and 3. And of course, we have Justin that'll join us and how some of those descriptions can be made as well, but differences as well. And so when we think about that interface, we have the opportunity to sell both our sheep and our goats that most commonly, if we think about it from a production standpoint, go to the processing plants. And at least that was what our more to commodity or even traditional system might have identified. And these were some that were actually younger. And in fact, there are different goat carcasses as well that can be sold at a lighter weight as well. Differences in how those are finished, but as we think about it, the important aspect is that there's differences in where that value comes from. And this is one of the things that I think is important as we talk about marketing for primarily our sheep and lamb industry, is that each of those cuts or subprimals or primals are going out potentially to be sold at either food service or retail. And the rack is going to be your largest value cut, and then followed by loin, and leg and foreshank, now foreshank passing leg, but certainly some options that we do have within our products. We have some information in terms of, again, just some carcass dollar values, and now below $6 per pound, at least from a hanging weight. But lambs are extremely valuable, and those that have goats as well, as we think about that and look at some of those market reports are certainly valuable, particularly on a price per pound basis. And then when they're hanging, the difference is that not as commonly are they sold as a cut basis. And in fact, whether that's domestic or imported goat meats, a lot of the times those are either sold as whole carcasses or potentially cubed and being able to be merchandised. As we think about it in terms of our retail setting, that's something that's extremely important. And truthfully, so much of what we think about in terms of a marketing of both our goats and the lambs that we do have is driven obviously by our consumers. We're well aware, but in terms of the retail standpoint, that's something where the American lamb industry, if you joined us for last month's webinar, we had the American Lamb Board representation that talked about how that was impactful and how people consumed more lamb in the past calendar year in 2021. And also, as we think about it from goats, it's an option that we have in terms of availability. And we have Mr. Fred Krueger that's going to join us at the back end of today's presentation that's built a processing facility here in North Dakota and work with what he sees in terms of sheep and goat marketing as well. We know that anytime in terms of proteins, we get to be center of the plate. And the advantage that we have as center of the plate is we do provide a high quality flavor that people want to be a part of. We have the opportunity to continue to connect our farmer and our rancher. And as we talked about in the previous webinars, of how we can pull that together and potentially be direct marketers, take emphasis in terms of the local commitment, but also realize that we're a large industry. And whether that's our goat industry or as USDA reports for our commercial standpoint of our commercial industry that hits all of those retail and all of those restaurateurs. And then a little bit as well, and I know that we have Jeremy going to join us from Zumbrota, and he can talk about some of the either the goats and or sheep that come through the marketplace, and truthfully, some commonly may have went to a harvest plan, but at this point, some of those are going to harvest and not being fed out to maybe a lighter weight or a larger weight, than maybe what we'd previously known. This is information that I received from Mr. Ron Cole, and this is just about 10 days old as we looked at it from live. And this is, again, sheep and lamb of live prices down in the bottom in the gray, and then the average carcass price and the USDA cutout value. And I showed you the cutout value that looks at each of those primals. We can certainly know that the carcass price of where that's at as well. And then as we kind of think and drawing this all together, certainly a puzzle as we think about it. And one of the things I think in terms of just the production agriculture of whether one is raising soybeans or cotton or lambs and goats, of when we think about this is that there's going to be different times in the marketplace where each of the different sectors or segments has a little bit more of the competitive advantage. And so we need to evaluate where that is and kind of how we think about providing value throughout the supply chain. And if you're not happy with the marketing option that you may or may not have, as we think about it here, is that maybe that opportunity does exist that you can be able to direct market your animals and your products as well. And so let's move on to our presenters. And I just wanted to give us a quick approach there and shape some of the things that we have. A quick introduction that we have, and if it's okay, Justin, I'm going to allow you to kind of start our presentation as well. And so Justin joins us through the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, and oh yes, he does. All right, what an advantage there. But does a bunch of the market reports, and now I feel trivialized for those watching. He's actually in the semi with the lambs, at least virtually tonight. And then also we have Jeremy Schafer, who works and owns and operates there, or certainly operates our Zumbrota Livestock Auction in southeastern part there of Minnesota. And Fred Krueger joins us as well. And he is here in North Dakota. And so we've got one, the home base is South Dakota, one in Minnesota, and one in North Dakota. And Fred has previously operated the whistle stop. We will talk about his option that he provides here for his butcher shop of the Whistle Stop Butcher Shop. And so we'll talk to him as well. But in order, we're going to allow Justin to give a talk and a little quick introduction. Move next to Jeremy, and then we'll have Fred as well. You'll also see my colleagues, Wayne Martin, Brenda Miller, and Colleen Carlson. That'll help if we have questions and help to coordinate this evening's lecture and presentation. Justin, thanks. The floor is yours.
Hi, Travis. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having me. As Travis said, my name is Justin Lumpkin. I'm based here in eastern South Dakota. My office up until this last year was based at Sioux Falls Regional Livestock. So what's the deal with Sioux Falls Regional Livestock? Well, that's one of the largest sheep and goat auctions in this part of the country, in this neck of the woods. So we're at the Sioux Falls Stockyards up until about 2009, until that closed. So then the yards business went down there to regional. Boy, we all thought that this sheep and goat thing was really kind of going the way of the dinosaurs a couple of years back. I cover the cattle markets a lot, and that's kind of where my focus is more. And so, like I say, with this sheep and goat deal, it seemed like it was really dying out, getting smaller. Anytime, someone was going to retire, the sheep and the goats, especially the ewes, were always the first to go to town when the kids would take over the place. So then here comes COVID the last couple of years. We wonder what's going to happen. Can the lamb market survive COVID? Oh my goodness, look what has happened to the lamb market. It's been phenomenal. So then we see the plant in Colorado get shut down. And again, we think it's the end of the world. We can't survive this. And here we go, just straight to the moon, it seems. So amongst all this market uncertainty, market information is now important more today than it ever has, I believe. And so that's where USDA comes into play. So at Sioux Falls Regional Livestock, I think, I don't have the number in front of me. I think they probably market about 80,000 head of sheep and goats a year. So, it's not large in the grand scheme, but yet it is very important. And as you all know, we don't see a whole lot of cash traded lambs anymore. And there's an awful lot of sheep and goats that get priced off of what happens at Sioux Falls Regional, whether it's a contractor or direct marketing, what have you. So Travis, should I share my screen and show a market report?
Yes, thanks. Feel free if you have that access, as we have you as a co-host, to share your screen and continue to describe it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here we start with our USDA homepage. We'll choose sheep. Scroll on down here a little bit to sheep auction reports. We'll choose South Dakota. So we're on the east side and the west side both, with St. Ange and Newell on the west, Sioux Falls Regional here on the east. We don't have a whole lot of sheep and goats coming to the sale right now. We kind of average anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 a week. So we also report the cattle. We've got everything on one report, so forgive me, you'll have to scroll down, bear with my scrolling until we get to the sheep and goats, scroll past the cattle. We don't have a whole lot of feeder lambs on this side of the state. It's amazing how things have changed. We see the guys really wanting to buy more of these light lambs going to kill. Like now we see our slaughtered lambs weighing from 60 to 150 pounds. So as you guys know, we apply quality and yield grades to these things to differentiate the prices, denote the quality, the yield. The same with the ewes, quality and yield grades. And Travis talked about earlier with the goats, keep scrolling. We get quite a selection at goats at times, and there's not a lot of information out there. And this is really where USDA comes into play yet again. So this last week, we didn't have a whole lot of kid goats. It looks like, boy, maybe 25 head, 20 head is all. But boy, they bring a heck of a price, $350 to $380. These are all prices per 100. We also cover the slaughtered goats as well. And the quality grades are the selections of 1, 2s, and 3s. The number 1s are the meat goats. The number 3s are your dairy goats. Your number 2s are kind of in betweens. Is there anything else I should go into further? Anybody have any questions?
There's one question here. What does fancy mean in the dressing column of that report?
That's an excellent question. I've worked for USDA for 26 years. I get that one quite often. A very subjective term. Usually what it gets to be, it's something that just sells so far outside the price range. It's such high quality. We have to find a way to list it. It's not necessarily indicative of the greater market.
Also, Justin, can you explain the other grades too? Thank you.
Yeah, so for slaughter lambs, we start off with prime, choice, good. Anyway, so then we get into our ewes. The ewes start off with good, and then we work into our utilities and coals. The coals are kind of your old, like it sounds, your old Dyer type ewes. Industry uses different terms than us. We'll talk about a utility ewe. The industry kind of calls them a boning ewe. The good ewes, I think the industry terms them a breaker ewe. And then like with our lambs, like I say, it's just mostly choice and prime.
Justin, we have a question and I guess this is going to depend regionally as well, but a really good question there. Maybe you see it there. Is there a price difference between hair and wool sheep at this point?
At times there is. It's funny. You think there would be a hard and fast rule, and there doesn't seem to be. So I've been with USDA for 26 years. I came back here to South Dakota in 2008. Prior to that, I was in Billings, Montana at Pays every week. And so in that early mid 2000s time, it seemed like then you couldn't sell a hair sheep, a feeder lamb. And now today, it seems like it really doesn't matter. There's not a price difference. So we still try to list the wool sheep separate from the hair breeds to show if there is a price difference. But boy, you look at those hair sheep and they look pretty shapy. They got a lot of natural thickness and muscle, pretty attractive looking sheep.
Certainly, and I know that there's some regionality as well. And previously, here I spent some time also in the San Angelo stockyards, and obviously that's one that we, as you may look at, or our producers may look at it. It certainly gets recorded and gives an idea as well, and so they're just used to it. A larger part now. It's not about a random hair sheep made it in. That's a majority of the sheep that are going to come through the San Angelo stockyard. And so those people that are interested in kind of pulling that together can do that and be able to know what they're producing. Additionally, now is that as we think about it from some that may go into the ethnic trade, here a couple of weeks before some holiday season, is that, Justin, there might be a little bit of a bonus for those kind that are 80 pounds and fleshy, in comparison, correct?
Absolutely. So it's funny. I'm not a sheep expert by any stretch of the imagination, but like I say, in my time in Montana, watching them sell feeder lambs, a lamb feeder, he wants something that's big and stretchy and thin and, growthy looking. And then here we come back on this side of the country and we see these short coupled fleshier lambs. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, boy, they're going to discount those. Well, then they bring a heck of a price. And I talked to the guy beside me, what happened there? Well, they were going to kill. So you brought up a good point, Travis. It's funny how the industry has changed, where now we see those larger lambs that will go to the slaughter accounts, where in the past, they were just kind of a really, really low value type feeder lamb.
Right. Thank you so much for that quick interpretation. We do have some questions here, and here's an easier one for you. Can you explain the CWT price from the per head price?
You bet. So all the livestock that we report that I'm aware of, at least in South Dakota, they're sold on a per hundredweight basis. So just take your decimal spot and move it 2 places to the left, and that's a price per pound. If we list anything that's sold per head, we'll say that on there. So then you're talking like mainly just your replacement type sheep, but everything else, as far as sheep and goats, seems to be sold dollars per hundredweight, price per pound.
We're going to save the question probably next. There's one that says, explain the regulations about crossing the borders of the auctions. And we're going to save that one for Jeremy as we get pulling that question through. But a quick kind of summary here, and we'll move on to Jeremy. Is what's the difference between choice and prime rating? And as the lamb is offered, at least from a live standpoint, truthfully, those are pulled together. Is that right, Justin?
Correct. When I first began my career 26 years ago in the Sioux City stockyards, anyway, so like I said, I wasn't a sheep expert, so I'm talking with my my mentor there. How do I quality grade these lambs? He says quality grading lambs is easy. He says 85% of the choice of the lambs will grade choice, 10% will grade prime, the other 5%, who cares? And it doesn't hardly take any flank streakings at all to make an animal choice in prime. And then of course we have that confirmation factor that comes into play, which really tends to confuse guys like me and others that are not experts at lamb grading. But yes, if you've got something that has a little bit of fat cover and it has some nice confirmation shape to it, it's probably going to be high choice in prime.
Absolutely. And in fact, thanks for that great segue, because I have had the opportunity to work with the American Lamb Board and Premier One Supplies to develop a video series that looks at lamb quality. And one of those that is completed is our USDA quality grade. And so we'll put that link in the chat box. So for those that want to point towards it, but yes, most of the lambs will certainly make it in the choice, and then some of that extra flank streaking gets in the prime. The difference is, big picture there, is that truthfully there's not a price differentiation at very many places of whether it was from the live to the harvested, or even the harvest lambs from prime to choice, whether they were moving to retail or food service. Okay, and we will come back to the next ones, but I want to move on to Jeremy, if that's okay, and provide Jeremy the opportunity to give a little bit of background there, and coming and joining us from Zumbrota, America, there in Minnesota. And so we really appreciate this. And again, the regionality that we have, I thought that we were getting more diverse by, having people from different corners, at least from our area of expertise. But I know that we have people from coast to coast here. And so, again, there is some regionality, but Jeremy, please help us out and provide some guidance of what you've seen at the Zumbrota Livestock Auction and what you see in the sheep and goat industries right now.
All right. Yeah, no, I'm, so I work for manage the barn down in Central Livestock in Zumbrota. Been down there for 6-7 years now. One of the auctioneers also. So I see that firsthand and what's all going on with that. We market about 40 to 45,000 head of lamb or sheep and goats just about every year. We have an auction just about every week, every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, where we basically sell our sheep and goats. We sell them at auction. So we've got, I'd say anywhere from 3 to 5 to 10 different buyers that come in every week that are looking for, 1 or 2 replacement doe kids or some replacement lambs, or are looking to fill their orders for their harvest for the week. So, I mean, we'll sell anywhere from, I think we had a sale here today. We sold about 350 head through a market. We get to the busy times of the year in the summertime here, we'll probably sell, we'll get up to that 900 to 1,000 head range, just depending on times of year and whatnot. So, but a lot of our big demand for where we're selling to is going ethnic trade, ethnic harvest. We've got some really good producers up in our shops up in the cities, up in the Twin Cities area, in Wisconsin, Western Wisconsin, that we sell a lot of lambs and sheep and goats to. That's kind of the big part of our trade. I mean, granted, we still got the people are coming to feed the kid goats. So we still got the people are coming wanting to feed the lambs, and but now the way the lamb market is gone, the way the goat market is gone, the way feed prices have gone, the guys that are coming to buy the 50-60 pound lambs and take them back home and make fat lambs out of them, it isn't really happening as much in my opinion. We're encouraging a lot of guys just to, they're making lambs the way the prices are. We got a lot of guys selling them at 50 to 100 pounds. 100 is kind of where the big driver of them is. The big thing, one thing that we drive on, that we got a lot of outside producers coming in and wanting to buy them and having interest in these. You know, we sell them every single week, so we got a fair marketplace for them every single week for you. Believing in true price discovery and the auction method way of marketing. Not granted, I'm an auctioneer, so I'm a little biased to that, but granted, we do that every single week, and we try our hardest to make that happen for them. So we'll either sell them through the ring every single week, or we do some private treaty deals where we're putting semi-loads of fat lambs together, or fat lambs and ewes together, or we got a private treaty deal of this gentleman needs X amount of fat lambs to fill his order for the week. We'll make some deals with them. But so we've got some options out there for some of the bigger producers that we have. Pretty much the only thing when you're selling with us at Central Livestock is, I mean, we're here to take your livestock on Sundays and Mondays and Tuesday mornings before the sales. We just pretty much require that everything has a Scrapey tag. So that's be a tag that for us would be coming from the Animal Department of Health. Basically tracks back to your place. So in case your farm or your operation, so if there's any drug residue, any issues with it, we can trace it back to your place. So if we don't have one of them tags in the ewe or lamb or goat, we have a vet on staff that will take care of that and do all that recording for that. So it's pretty simple, pretty easy to go. But if you've been in the sheep and goat industry long enough, that tag just is pretty common for you. Kind of our commission things that we kind of do, we kind of charge on a per head basis, so to speak, throwing through the ring. We're about 12.25 for commission, which in my opinion is pretty minuscule compared to what some of the upside of some of these markets have been. It's been really attractive for a lot of producers that, hey, we got a guy that privately could pay this, but I think you're going to get way more going through the ring and going through the auction method way of marketing to capitalize some more money for what you got to sell. And I think the market's way better than what some of our private treaty guys are willing to pay. So we encourage a lot of guys just to go through the ring and not be scared of that, because the market's been good and it's always been good. We've kind of been hitting ever since COVID really happened. We got to 4 or 5 months down the road of the COVID, and it really just kind of started taking off for us. So and for our producers, it's been working really well for them.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate your input and background there. And as expected, you provided enough inspiration to him to get some questions. All right. So rock on. Good. Okay. So okay. So one of the questions actually that came in there is, can you still be organic with a Scrapey tag? And certainly you can be. Okay. Yes. And yep, you need a Scrapey tag. And one person here, it's been great to have the livestock auction do the Scrapey. Well, that's to record them primarily. Now, if I forget, Jeremy, I think this is a fun one, or I choose not to, or whatever that is. I mean, it's obviously regulations that whether you have a sheep or goat, for the most part, that you want to put those Scrapey tags in. But if you do not, how does Zumbrota handle that?
So we've got our local vet service that's on hand, and they're going to go through and make sure everything either has a Scrapey tag in them, and if it don't, they will put a Scrapey tag in them, so that we have an access to know where that lamb or goat originated from. So they will put them in their in the animals for a fee, obviously. If you do it yourself or get them from the state, they're basically free for everybody. But that's the way the Animal Board of Health wants to handle it. So we can track some things, and we've had some issues that have gone to some ethnic processors and have had drug residue. And well, we want to be able to make sure we have that conversation with that producer, and so we know where everybody's at and know what the rules and regulations are for selling their sheep and goats. So, and obviously protect the consumer that's getting that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that it's important to keep in mind. And one of the questions says that that registered sheep are moving away from Scrapey. And I guess I'm going to take that interpretation first off is that we're making progress from a seed stock operations within and across America to move towards a more preferred codon 171. Okay. But the other thing is that also when we look at it from a Scrapey surveillance, for both sheep and or goats, is that it's now anomaly of when we see the positives. And so we've made progress from there. I don't think that we can particularly call this an endemic challenge anymore or something that's going to mess with the world. But truthfully, I guess I see this as some advantages, because when we think about it, even with our Scrapey tags, and obviously they're not all electronic IDs at this point, but we have a tracking system that's truthfully better than a lot of our protein colleagues, because that's there and has been put in for us to be able to be used. And so one of the questions is, do you accept a tattoo, or does it need to be a tag? And a tattoo would not be acceptable, right? Because that doesn't have at least the premises of location that we do need.
Correct.
And so that's certainly a good question as well. But for the most part, I think that there's some advantages. Of course, you said the State Board of Animal Health there in Minnesota, but those are each in each of the states and governed as well. But it's the USDA guidelines that we follow from there, and hopefully we can be able to use it. Quick questions that we got several of them, so thanks for your patience. But I think this is a good overarching one, is at why at some markets, and I know that you can answer this one too, goats are sold by the head, and some of the times they're sold by the pound. And so I know that there's differences on those. Is there any guidance that you identify, or is it just young ones at a certain one, and maybe more of the old aged does or bucks? Then what's your thoughts in terms of per head and per pound?
Well, and for me, I mean, I've had guys ask me that question many times. When I started with Central, that's the way they had started selling. That's the way they sold. They sold lambs by the pound and goats by the head. That's the way they've always done it. I don't know why it got started that way, but that's just the way we've always done it in Zumbrota. I've had other guys ask me why we don't sell just by the pound straight across the board, because it make it easier. And well, that's the way our system is working, and that's the way we've done it for years. I guess I don't see any reason why we should have to potentially change that. I mean, it maybe be depending on region and area and whatever. We just got some people that are accustomed to that, and that's why we've been doing what we've been doing, and it's obviously been successful. We've been able to still get the money out of the goats, and by not having to do it by a per pound basis, and that's the way we do it. That's just the way we do it in Zumbrota. Other markets maybe do it differently, but that's just the way we do it in Zumbrota. No right or wrong reason for it. It's just the way we've done it in Zumbrota for years. So.
Okay, super. There was one that was earlier that talked truthfully about interstate commerce to the livestock auctions and or from the livestock auction markets. And I guess to backtrack just a little bit in terms of animal health and truthfully traceability. And in fact, I was part of some of the ASI workforce group that looked at, kind of where we can move forward, at least from a sheep standpoint on traceability, is that most animals, right or wrong, are going through the livestock auction barn. And so what are the requirements in relation to health papers in or out, or what should people do? And obviously probably lots of lambs crossed to come in, from Wisconsin, and certainly then they have the opportunity in lambs and goats as well. So go ahead.
Yep. So as far as if you're bringing lamb, I mean, obviously we need the Scrapey tags. That's kind of our main number one goal. But otherwise, coming into our market, we're a federally approved market. So we don't need health papers to come to some Central Livestock and Zumbrota. That could be for the cattle, the hogs, XYZ. But going out, if you're a potential buyer looking to buy feeder lambs, buy goats, buy anything that's going out of state or crossing lines, we've got vet staff on staff that'll just write a health paper. They'll read the tag that's in their ear, know that's going to your place, and issue that health paper to you. And it's pretty simple. It really ain't that big of a deal. Obviously, we send a lot to Wisconsin and Iowa. So those are two big main states we deal with. But after that, if gentlemen are taking them to harvest or whatnot, they'll sign a slaughter affidavit on them, present to where they're going, and handle for crossing state lines also. So
great, thank you. Just trying to get through here. It's came up more than once now, Jeremy. But the big picture question, it keeps being asked, and you touched on it a little bit. But the difference between like you described in terms of wool sheep and hair sheep, let's just talk about, in April first. Let's do this one step at a time. Is there a difference then?
I don't believe so. As long as the kind and quality are there. I mean, today I had a really fancy set of 95-pound lambs that, I mean, they topped the market for our 90 to 100-pound lamb department. They were hair lambs. I mean, the gentleman does a really good job with them. It's all in kind and quality, and a lot of our producers this time of year are going to harvest with them. And if they're the right kind and everything, they've done everything in part to make them the best that they possibly can, they're going to top the market. I really don't see much of a difference in it, other than I do have a few select buyers here and there that they try to steer away from the hair lambs for wherever their outlets are, where they're marketing them after they purchase them in Zumbrota. But for me, and my side of things as being a market manager and auctioneer, I really don't see much difference in it. Hair lambs will outdo the wolves, and wolves will outdo the hair. It just depends on type and quality.
Sure. And this one's a bigger picture kind of overarching question, and I'll try to attack it just a little bit. One of the questions is, just what is the prices on an average? And truthfully, and then, where's this going? And when we can talk about that in just a little bit, but even from a sheep standpoint, some of those younger lambs and lighter lambs were over $3 a pound. And yet, and still truthfully are some of them, as we think about it from a commercial standpoint, if that's what I was to describe, the 145-pound lamb is now getting closer to $2. So, ladies and gentlemen, and so we were at a point when we saw those at, $270, $280 per pound live, and those are being harvested. And truthfully, that was a lot of supply and demand, right? And so big picture, and even as we got through it from last summer, as I at least try to describe to some people in my personal evaluation, is that, a lot of the lambs right now, if we were to say that of April 1, just to step ahead, is that those got pulled out of the market because they went to the non-traditional approach. And as the market was going up like this, Jeremy, people are like, whoa, I'm not feeding these lambs. I've never seen these prices before, and somebody else is going to own them or feed them. And then they were harvested. And so then when we got to the summer, we were behind. And so just again, to kind of pull these things together, some things are different as well in terms of indicators. One of the indicators that you can actually have access to is the Colorado Feedlot inventory. And with the Colorado Feedlot inventory, that gives us an idea, because most lambs, if they're on feed, are on feed in Colorado, and certainly there's several different two large processing plants that are in that state. And in fact, I spent some, time in Colorado as well in my previous world, but knowing that helps us to have a little bit of an idea of what's in the supply chain. Now, there's more in the supply chain right now that are happen to be going to potentially suppress the prices that we will not reach, most likely the levels that we previously did. Now, I hope that we can provide a threshold at the bottom side so that we don't see $1 per pound again. All right. And so that we can stay closer to $2, $2.25, $2.50 relative to in comparison. But there are certainly some options as well to try to look at where we're at and kind of what we have an impact. And last year, we were just so short in terms of supply that truthfully, some of the processing plants couldn't fill their orders to go to large grocery stores. And so if you can't fill the orders, then we don't have as much lamb as we'd like to sell. And so big picture, again, there's a wild card there on what the 60 to 80 weight lambs are bringing, and will continue. And there's another thing as we think about that from whether it's accelerated lambing or fall lambing or fall kidding, depending on what you want to do to be at the market when nobody else is at the market, right, Jeremy? Because it's a lot more fun to do that, because we know that in both the sheep markets and in the goat markets, of those primarily group of those animals are born in February, March, April. And when they are born in February, March, April, or whatever that may be, is that they're ready in August, September, October, November. And when lots of them are there and available at the same time, we have differences in prices. So people are, now as we think about it from April 1st, if they have animals, they have the opportunity to turn that ram or turn that buck out and look at it a different one. But that's certainly one of the things that we can talk about at a different point in terms of staying focused on this evening's webinar. I think we do have some great questions. And in fact, my talented colleagues are going to help pull these together. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't grab this one of talk about the difference between new crop and old crop, just as I kind of gave the supply, I guess, preach right there and talked about a little bit of our inventory of what's available. And so, people see that on market reports, but maybe that's not always a term that we would be accustomed to or used to if we didn't see that. And so, Jeremy, what's new crop versus old crop?
So that'd be pretty much on our fed lamb side of things. New crop would pretty much be the appropriate age lambs. We can see some lambs that we don't really see too many old crop lambs this time of year. Most of the lambs are cleaned up. That had been from last year's lamb crop, so to speak. Most of the I'd say the fat lamb trade is pretty much cleaned up for this time of year. We don't see a lot of fed lambs. Most of the lambs that we see this time of year would actually be probably potentially old croppers, but the way we quoted the market report today, they seem to be appropriate age, young enough yet that we didn't call them old crops. But if we did get into section time of the year where we do got some old crops, new crop fed lambs in the market, usually the new crops will sell better than the old crop lambs, just based on age. That's what I see in the producers that we have. And usually the old crop lambs will usually have some more size to them. They'll be 140, 50, 60, 170 pound lambs. They'll be bigger lambs, got some age to them and whatnot. So, and so most of that, we don't really see a whole lot in the feeder lamb side of things at this point in time of the year. Obviously this is our market report here from today. Pretty darn good market, I would have to say, sitting in southeast Minnesota. But them under 70 pound lambs bringing up to $3.40 a pound. A lot of 70 to 90 pound lambs, $2.75 to $3.25. And there'd be pretty much the ones that were topping towards the top of that spectrum were the new crop lambs that were coming to town. The producers that are lambing early, getting some size to them, getting some growth to them, and those are the ones to take advantage of that market or at this point in time. So, and actually that group of 90 pound, 95 pound lambs, they bring $3 a pound here today. That good set of hair lambs, they topped our market here today in Zumbrota. So.
Outstanding. I'm gonna allow one last question since you still have this up, and there's several, but one of the things that I think is insightful, and again, I haven't made it to old yet, but I'm aiming to be more seasoned. But one of the things, Jeremy, as I've seen this, is that when you see, here of your use, we just keep setting prices, okay? And so if I would have bet $1 on once we reached $1 a pound, that I said, those individuals are, if they're not meeting what you want to do on production goals, they need to go somewhere else. And now we're, even on this today's group, ones that are $1.50 per pound. And so, those prices are probably certainly numbers that you've not seen before as well. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. And, back in the day when I started, took over for an auctioneer that had been there for, I think 17 years, very seasoned auctioneer. And back in the day when he pretty much told me, you got them little kid goats to $2 a pound, you were doing good. You got them 50 pound feeder lambs, new croppers this time of year, to get them to $2.10 a pound, you were doing really good. And obviously by our reports, we're far outseeding that. And then especially on our used side of things right now, we've actually come down from our top. You'd go back 6 to 8 weeks ago, we were sitting, we had some used bring close to $2 a pound or better. It was just because of supply and demand. It's nobody had any potentially any used to sell, just because we're getting close to lambing time, and demand was there. We needed the buyers needed the product, and they were willing to pay for it. So we've seen some record prices in that. We're not at the peak right now. We've already hit the peak, I feel, in the U market, but still very good prices when you put it all together over a 5 or 10 year average. It's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it makes it interesting. And today's function is not going to be on replacement use. certainly some of those decisions could be, at a later time, but, those are going to come up incrementally as well, if that's the case. But a couple things there as you have both your goats. If you can go scroll down just one more second here, just a point of clarification there on the left-hand side of your small, medium, and large goats, that is on a per head basis. And then
Correct.
also on the goats of the billies or the bucks and the older wethers and the nannies, those are on a per head basis as well. That's on the right side.
Yep. So all of our, we'll have our feeder pig market here, but obviously the goats, this is our representative quotes that we put together. So on the goat side of things are kind of broken down into categories of weight. Your big billies and stuff would fall into your large goat category. Nanny goats, obviously they've kidded, they've had at least one group of kids with them, and that's kind of where they fall into that category. So pretty much everything's on a representative basis. We just pick a few quotes out of the market to help highlight transactions that we had for the sale today. And that kind of gives you a range of where we've kind of been. Obviously, all the goat or dairy and meat goat breeds are all put together in that quote. So obviously, most of the time, the meat breeds sell stronger than the dairy goats do. But that's all dependent on kind and quality, though, also. So.
Well, thank you. And so you've already answered one of the questions, and I'm going to transition just a little bit here, if we can kind of move on to our next colleague. But I'm just going to summarize that because one of the inquiries was, is there a difference in terms of kind of the boar goat or the more muscular ones in terms of the dairy, and also in terms of price reporting? For those people that want to see that, they can go to any of the regional stockyards. And like you said, those more heavier muscled goats that are going to be in category 1 or are going to be in category 1, excuse me. A lot of the dairy goats may be in 3, and if they're kind of in between, they'll fit in that too. And so you can be able to identify just a little bit of what those expectations are as well. And so feel free to utilize those market reports as best you can. But we're going to introduce Mr. Fred Krueger, and thank you, Jeremy. I know that we got a whole bunch of questions yet, but I think that we've got. I want to include Mr. Fred Krueger, and let me just grab here just a quick introductory slide that has the information from Fred. So just a little bit of guidance. So Fred owns and operates, as you see there, the Whistle Stop Butcher Shop that's in Amenia, North Dakota. And so near here in Fargo, America. Okay, so across the Big Kid River from Moorhead as well. But he certainly has had some interest and some experience previously when he converted a refrigerated semi-trailer into the goat slaughter facility. But now he's went through the work to make sure that we can have that and have the regulations. And so one of the things is why I wanted to include Fred here so much is that he went through the inspection through the North Dakota to get state inspected, and some of that information and that paperwork that's continued to be required, and has previously had and continues to have or had sheep and goats through there. And also, even as I saw Fred previously, at the West Fargo sale barn, when that used to happen, which is different in terms of the marketplace for those of us that are in the eastern side of North Dakota, is that he'd be there and it would purchase some animals. And so some of the times people could come to him. And even with my discussions with him previously there, and now as he runs his business, is that word of mouth can sell a lot of products, right? And so it gives the opportunity, and I certainly appreciate Fred for helping us out. And so Fred, the floor is yours. I gave a little bit of the background there, and you can kind of describe what you found and what the stories are, and again, kind of how our sheep and goat industry is continuing to evolve. Thanks.
Well, I'm Fred Krueger. Me and my wife, we operated the Whistle Stop Butcher Shop at Amenia. we started out as a goat breeding operation, but then we had so much interest in people wanting to come out and butcher on the farm that we decided we'd check that end out. So we went out and we worked with the State Meat Inspection Board in Bismarck. And I was impressed. I mean, I think they done pretty much everything that they could do to make an operation go and function. And I've got a lot of good things to say about the meat inspection board in North Dakota. And we shut our butcher shop down for a while for the COVID-19 because, as you heard, it's set up in a 48-foot reefer trailer. And at times when we were doing custom exempt, there'd be a group of people coming out, and my wife and I are both of the age where we didn't want to be involved, with a bunch of people around. So we closed it down for a time. So that's kind of where we're sitting now. But for people that are either raising goats or in, one thing I do want to mention that the USDA has changed some of the rules and regulations as far as custom exempt. When we went and checked with the state of North Dakota, you had to have a state inspected facility to butcher custom exempt, where now basically you don't. But I'm not sorry that we went through jump through all the hoops, because now we can butcher, and we have for grocery stores, restaurants. So I mean, it opens up another market there for you too.
So thanks Fred, the sheep and goats that can you just provide a little bit of guidance of ones that you had or ones that you had to wrangle, or how did that kind of work?
Well, it was kind of a different story out there. We butchered a lot for the ethnic group, and I found that the majority of my customers preferred the dairy goat. They didn't like buying fat, for one thing, and they thought the boar goats had too much fat. So I always had a lot better luck selling the dairy goats. And but that was for, sometimes if you'd had all dairy goats out there and no boar goats, they would have probably wanted boar goats. It's just kind of, they use whatever they can to for their advantage as far as purchasing too. So I mean,
a question came up of and again, lots of people and lots of diversity and lots of people truthfully enjoy goat and sheep, but they're a big picture question that a person put in there is, what does the ethnic market mean? Which is probably more time than we have. But who are the people? What in terms of backgrounds or ethnicities or religions that came and wanted to work with your operation?
Well, in the year 2019, we butchered 750 goats and lambs out there, just me and my wife, which was a lot. But we had customers from Bhutan. They were probably, at first, they were the largest customer. But then we also had the Muslims, and then Africans. We had Africans come out too. Seemed like the Africans, though, they preferred lamb, for the largest part. There's a few of them that wanted goat too, but the majority of them preferred lamb. Now the ones from Bhutan and in India and that, they prefer goat. Okay,
and in relation to kind of just even like the halal or different kosher slaughters, was there any particular request, or you said nope, this is how we're going to do that? And I know I've talked to you a little bit about that question, but just curious how to help make that into consideration.
Well, for the halal, we have to do it according to the Muslim. And they have to do the killing. You know, they had to have somebody there at the slaughterhouse to pray over the goat and do the actual killing. And then we could take it from there. But I don't really care for the halal because, you know, they don't stun them or anything. They just cut their throat. And if it wouldn't be for the religious exemption, I don't think they could even do it. But maybe they could. I'm not real sure about that.
Sure. And did you find that there was, you know, I mean, you said that you appreciated the chance to go through the state inspection, but is there additional like costs in comparison there from the custom exempt to state inspection in terms of the regulations of the state involvement?
No, the only cost really is you had to swab the carcass and then send it to there were different places, but we sent ours to the University of South Dakota in Brookings for bacteria and stuff like that. But that was, I don't know, I believe that was $40 or something like that. And I think you had to do it like 9 times a year. You didn't have to do it every week, but you had to do it so many times in a season or in a year. But other than that, no, you didn't pay for any of the inspection. You know, the state, they furnished the inspector. So there's no cost there. And they really, really did help. I mean, as far as getting us set up with the paperwork and, you know, kind of guiding us, taking us by the hand and guiding us through it. I was pleased.
Now, just a quick kind of follow-up. It says, are you butchering or did you allow the buyers to butcher in your facilities?
The only thing that I done the killing, skinning and gutting. And then I basically let them take it over from there because I wasn't about to clean their guts. I didn't have time. Me and the wife one day out there, we butchered 21 goats and lambs. And I mean, I done all the butchering and she just cleaned up. When there was one client out of the butcher shop, things were cleaned up for the next one. And so no, I wasn't about to clean guts. And we had 2 cleaning stations in there where they can. And that's what them tables are in that one picture. And so, you know, they could get through there and clean their guts and probably about as fast as what I could kill them, you know, and skin them.
And did you have an inspector there when you were slaughtering?
Yes, when we done it for the butcher shop or for the restaurants or grocery stores, yes, but for custom exempt, no.
Right. And did you find that there was a difference in terms of bucks or wethers or does as we think about it from a goat approach?
Now, the Muslims, there's a lot of them that prefer intact males. Now, the ones from Bhutan in the Mideast, they won't buy anything but a castrated goat or lamb. You know, they want wethers.
Okay. And how long does it take from a harvest standpoint on the start to put that animal down? And again, just a quick description there is that most times we can use a captive bolt stunner that renders those animals unconscious, and then they actually then pass away or perish from lack of blood, or as you described in terms of if so needed to make that first cut with a knife as well, and that you don't stun them. But how long does it take to get from start to finish there for either a goat or a lamb?
You mean for the butchering process?
Yes, sir.
Oh, probably between 10 and 15 minutes.
Okay, good.
Because I got a hide puller, you know, so you basically, we skin down the legs, skin down the belly, and then we hang them and we pull the hide off. So I mean, that's just very fast.
Sure. And was there a certain charge or price that you found to work for you?
Well, not really. I mean, some people really like you kind of had to figure out who you were dealing with, because some of them you'd have to start high because they wanted a deal. And that's the Africans, basically. You know, a lot of them are business people over in Africa, and it's just their custom. I'm not saying anything bad about them. It's just their custom. You know, they have to get you down in price a little bit, or they don't feel that they're getting a deal, you know. But the one from the Mideast and Bhutan and that, I think they're Hindu as a rule. And I think the Hindu are a very kind people. So I mean, I never had any trouble with any of them.
Sure. Well, at least thank you for kind of sharing that. Just for example, and some, if you have information that's different, feel free to put it in there. The USDA puts in at approximately about $60 would be what it would cost to harvest a sheep, is what they would say. And so I would, from what I understand with some of our processors, $50 to $75 for harvest would cover it. Truthfully, in order to get it packaged, it might be just a little bit more than that as well. But so there are, you know, going to be differences as well in terms of the pricing. But I guess $60 to $70 would be my guess if I was to generalize, or an educated guess there to get to bring that together.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty close. I mean, you know, sometimes you could buy the goats a little cheaper, the lambs, you know, and sometimes you couldn't. But we kind of tried to have a price per pound, so it was always the same, you know.
Super. And so I know that again, and we'll kind of bring Justin and Jeremy back into here as well. But there is a good question. Also is, you know, an individual said that they know that the goat prices increase around ethnic holidays, but is the demand and price really just as strong throughout the year because of the lack of supply of during the off times? And I guess that one would be more goat related. But man, you know, and Justin can chime in at the end, but we certainly haven't seen depressed prices, at least for a couple of years now. Fred, would you kind of agree with that when you were having them, is that it didn't matter? There was lots of different options.
Yeah, I didn't change my prices because of the time of the year. Because, you know, when we were butchering heavy, we had about 400 animals out there to choose from too, which I'm not so sure was a smart thing, you know. But we tried to keep our price pretty steady.
Good, thank you. And so some of the people, as they put into the chat there, had harvest prices approximately from 70 to 100. And so those are certainly some of the differences that people were willing to put in there. And then when we think about that, you know, one of the big pictures is that even from an infrastructure standpoint, and again, I'm going closer to higher arching from a United States government level, but funds have and can be pointed towards states. And then a lot of times we have current states that are able to provide grants for small processing facilities to maybe own a vacuum packager that's a little bit better, or to help with their rail and shackle system. And so there are some options that truthfully, some of the small and medium processors, and if I was to call this a 3-state region in North Dakota, Minnesota, and South Dakota that I work more with, is that there are options for us to be able to capitalize on that, and for people to for processing plants to be part of it. Now, big picture here, when we think about marketing, and again, today's is not 100% on direct marketing, but I wanted to include Fred there. But one of the things that we want to keep into consideration is that if you so chose that, it's pretty tough, and you want to work with whoever that person is to make sure that you can get on their calendar for a harvest date. Okay. And so big picture, if you decide that you're going to feed out some cattle or even the goats or the sheep, is that you're going to want to build a relationship with somebody if you actually want to kind of pull together and do some of that direct marketing. We've got lots of different questions, but I'm going to ask you, Fred, here first, and then we'll be able to provide it a little bit wider. But thoughts on terms of a mobile facility that goes to the farm, and what are the thoughts? And I know that that's something, even from an infrastructure standpoint, that several people think is a great idea, and certainly it is. The difference is that it takes a lot of time and energy and travel from, even if you find people that are 50 miles apart or 70 miles apart or whatever that may be, to go somewhere. And truthfully, when you're going there, a lot of times you're going to be harvesting 1 animal, 2 animals, at the most 10 animals. And don't take this the wrong way, because I think that there is opportunity for people to want to do that. But what are your thoughts in terms of mobile slaughter facilities, and why hasn't it cranked a little bit more? And what do you think?
Well, mine basically is a mobile. All I'd have to do is hook a semi up to it.
That's true.
But I don't know. I think water would be a problem. Your offal disposal would be a problem. And like ours, when we set ours up, they wanted us to go through the health department and set up a septic system. Well, I started checking around in Minnesota and all over, and they said, for goodness sakes, don't let anybody talk you into a septic system. So basically, we have a septic tank there, but we pump it out and we land apply the water, which we're allowed to, and then we compost the offal in a pile of wood chips. But I don't know, that would be a problem as far as I can see.
Yep.
If they could get that taken care of, it'd be a good deal, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, lots of different places, have funded them, but then we need to identify a place where those people are going to work on a regular basis and throughout the year, and making sure that we have refrigeration in July and that we don't freeze my own toes off in February, right? And so differences in terms of just control, obviously, from a temperature and climate of what we've got. So a couple things, and I want to continue to open it up and ask my colleagues. I know that my talented colleagues and coworkers have been pulling together some of the questions that maybe fit, or maybe that we've passed over here when we talk about it. But one of the things that was brought up from a panelist here is that when they call the ranch, or when you have the butcher who skins, guts, and prepares the carcass, and then somebody can take that to the butcher, and that's actually in California as well. And so an interesting part also. And then so we know that just butcher and slaughter plants right now are backed up, and no doubt, like it says, if USDA inspection is required, are there any new programs to entice new butchers? And so what I would say here, just in our region, is that, Ridgewater Community College, and we're also building through the University of Minnesota, kind of pulling together some options as well in the junior college system. In North Dakota, we also are working with Wahpeton and the College of Sciences down there in Wahpeton on building kind of more of meat sciences focus and meat trade training. And again, as we think about that, I'm only in charge of a couple of things here in North Dakota and Minnesota that I'm aware of, but I think that there's probably programs that are happening as well. And so thank you for that. The difference is that, again, if we can get those people involved in the meats part of the industry, because even if you follow any of my passions and hopefully talents as well of connecting that producer to the consumer, we obviously need the more of our meats focused and meats driven people that can help us out. One point of information is a potential problem of with the mobile site is that it's people wanting the goats for consumption are different than the people raising them for slaughter. That's absolutely a great point to keep into consideration. And so bringing it to the farmer's yard doesn't really help it if your consumer isn't there as well.
Yeah.
And one of the other points is that it said as we talk about different ethnic marketing is that you got to know your customer, and that's what I appreciate you, Fred, for being so vocal and for sharing some of your thoughts as well. Colleagues, what's a particular question that you feel as though we may want to highlight here as we bring Jeremy and Justin back in?
So Travis, one of those questions is what considerations should be made when trying to decide to market larger quantities of lambs, maybe truckload types of quantities, and the local market route versus exploring private treaty? And one thing we kind of didn't touch on here, is body conditioning scoring, but growing up on the farm, you don't send eight sheep that look the same and 2 smaller ones. You send them in lots that look the same, that are kind of in the same body conditioning scoring. I would say that. And then Jeremy, your thoughts on that, and then maybe address this issue where you can have a truckload of lambs versus small quantities.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, on the lot, probably the bigger the lot that's available is probably going to be worth potentially more. If you especially get a truckload of them, it's be a lot easier for the buyer and seller to come together. Especially my side of things, we deal with a lot of that in the cattle side of things, which can be related back to the sheep industry. It's very tough to for me to bring or have a customer bring 2 or 3 head to town. They may top the market, but when the buyer needs 50, 75, 100 head to fill the order, it's going to take them a while to get things put together. So if they got a bigger lot that's put together, which I do have a lot of producers that bring in gooseneck load of what their lambs that they're willing to market, that always helps the market for them, because a bigger group, they all come from the same home, they're all the same together, and they're all sold at the same time. So they bring 25 head to town. There's 25 head that are probably coming in the ring, and we're not having to sort them and dice them up into 7, 8, or 10 different drafts to try to get them sold. So obviously uniformity is huge on the marketing side of things, and the bigger the lot, potentially can help the seller in their decision to market.
A little bit of follow up on that. Thank you, Jeremy, for pointing that. And one of the descriptions that Colleen kind of pointed at us is that we didn't talk about body condition scoring. And again, that's another 30 minutes that we don't have this evening. But big picture, even when we talk about it from some of those smaller framed lambs, of whether those are hair sheep or whether they're just small or Cheviots or Southdowns or whatever that kind of fit at 60 to 80 pounds, is that you're actually getting a little bit of external fat on those, and you want some in relation to muscle quality. And so part of that is from the refrigeration that does happen, and so that there is a fat covering during the refrigeration process as they go to the cooler. But also from a palatability standpoint, is that some, and then depending on what some individuals like. Again, Fred said that some purchasers may choose to get the scrawniest dairy goat in the corner, okay? But for the most part, if you're providing consistency of your product or building a branded product or sending those to the commercial standpoint, is that you want at least 2/10 of a back fat on a sheep. The difference is that on a goats, And those that are experts know that the goats don't carry as much external fat. And the difference is they put more on internally. And so then when you're doing the harvest, and then if they are a little fatter than we prefer, and then when Fred is eviscerating those animals, is that there's a lot more fat internally that will be removed as well. And so that's just a small differences in relation to that. And of course, as we know, in relation to the sheep industry and our lambs, is that we don't want to get those too far in terms of condition as well. And in fact, one of the description of those old crop lambs and differences in seasonality is that with those old crop lambs that are 12 months old, 14 months old, 16 months old, hopefully not very commonly, but those are ones that are going to get larger, and those are ones taking discounts. And in fact, right now, if you had some of those that are on the higher end, you are now taking some of those price discounts, because that's not what we need in the marketplace right now. And some of those younger ones are now making it or getting into the system at a little bit higher rates here. And as we kind of continue to move through the summer, more of those will be available as well. Colleen?
So one of the other questions is, how long do you have to let a goat hang? Did we kind of answer that question already?
Okay. Super. Thank you. Well, Fred, do you want to take that, or I will, but go ahead.
We never let ours hang at all. I mean, we butchered them. They took and cleaned the guts, chopped them up in little pieces and took them home.
So I will describe that one, Colleen, from a meat science standpoint. And one of the things is in pork, okay, is that we want to get the pig from pig to pork chilled down as quickly as we can. Otherwise, we have problems in terms of the pH level and the water holding capacity. And so there's a difference there from the harvest time to getting that meat cool enough. The reason that, and in fact, when I work with a custom exempt or state or USDA inspected spot for as well on a beef carcasses, is that we're getting those harvested and getting that temperature decline isn't as large of an issue. But the reason that we're using aging is to increase the tenderness of that meat. So it's degradation of the muscle tissue fibers and the proteolytic enzymes that we have, so that we can have a more tender ribeye and tenderloin. The advantage is in both lamb and goat, as we describe them, is that tenderness isn't our problem. Okay, and so it can be harvested on Tuesday, chilled to Wednesday, and consumed on Fred's grill on Thursday. All right, and tenderness won't be our problem. If we did that with beef, particularly in some of our middle meats, it wouldn't be maybe as tender as we prefer. And so we have the options to kind of move it through the system. When we think about it from fresh and frozen, that's another part of it as well, because when we have frozen product, if we have direct marketing of sheep and goats and we got to make to the farmer's market, then we need to have supply, right? And so, but those don't particularly need to be aged as well. And some of our research would say that, if we can, a day or two is an ample amount to maintain some tenderness. If we do freeze it, some research that we've conducted here, we do have a little bit of an impact on water holding capacity and juiciness. And so freezing it will kind of make it a little not as juicy and cause some challenge in terms of water holding capacity. But that's a small challenge in comparison to lamb is tender, goat is tender. If we can get it fresh, that's just fine. And if it doesn't age, that's just fine as well. Sorry, that was a long answer. Thanks.
Well, and hopefully too, but this is a really important, I think this is timely here too. We did talk about this with the American Lamb Board, but what's your theory on why we're experiencing high price goat trends and lamb over the last 3 to 5 years? And they also suppose here, could it be the drought? But Travis, I mean, we kind of talked about this last month, but I'm going to let you answer that as far as the growth of our ethnic markets and our capacity for American lamb here in the United States.
No way. I'm surrounded by talented individuals on this call. So you guys could take this, a big picture, it was supply, like I said, at least in the initial part of the pandemic. Plus we, at least in lamb, consumed a little bit more. But, goat is not, the lamb, it took 2 years here. We're on kind of year 2. Goat's been longer, Justin, right? I mean, of pushing the $3, $4 a pound. And so there's several things. But Justin, you've been seeing and watching this, and you can take those in comparison, particularly in the goats.
Absolutely, Travis. So like you said, we've seen that goat deal. It made you scratch your head for, like you say, 3 to 5 years. Why the heck are these kids bringing so much more than the lambs? And so you hear people thinking, boy, maybe we should get out of the sheep and get into the goats, tongue in cheek. But I think part of it, Fred kind of touched on some of it as well. If you look at the demographics of our American citizens now, we're seeing more people that really prefer to eat goat. And we got to remember that's the most widely consumed protein on the planet is goat meat. And so, yeah, everywhere you go, it seems like the goat, they just sell really, really well. We also see it as far as new producers being able to enter the industry. It doesn't take a lot of capital. So you can get started, and we see so many people really wanting to live almost like a homestead lifestyle. And this farm to fork movement is real. It's really grown over the last several years, I think. There's I'm seeing a lot of people that want to do this direct marketing.
Jeremy, are you comfortable with this? I mean, again, as we think about it from a future outlook, even particularly on goats, as we're thinking 5 years in, is that there's no big reason for this to take a digger. There should be some stability. Would that be fair, at least in your region?
I would say so, but I also think there's getting to be a lot more families starting to get, maybe grew up on a cattle farm or cow calf operation, dairy farm, are married, got some kids. Hey, let's get a few goats around because we still want to have somewhat of the farm lifestyle, not the work, not the capital investment, obviously, like Justin said. And they're jumping into it. And hey, I need something for my kid to show at the county fair for 4-H this year, or the FFA show, or have the potential to take the state fair. So we're seeing some expansion in that, I guess, in my region anyway. So I think, obviously that's always a good thing. But at some point in time, we may hit a wall. I don't know when, but we may hit a wall where, that may come back to hurt us a little bit. But I don't, and in my aspect from the marketing side of things and what I'm seeing in my facility every single week, I guess I don't see it to be an issue at all. Obviously, we see more of an issue with the buyer side of things and the consumer seeing how much it's costing at the other end when it gets harvested and when they're taking that meat home. We've maybe seen some pushback from that the prices are getting too expensive for them when we've reached some of these high levels that we've seen here in the last 2, 3, 4 months. We've seen some pushback from that, so that's kind of been one thing we've been kind of watching to see how that kind of trends out, and that's kind of potentially why we're at maybe a little bit lower level than we have been at certain times of the year.
Sure. And big picture, I've seen, just this past week, I saw $5.50 per pound ground beef. And so there was actually some that was higher percent lean at $3.99 a pound. And, a person who's stacked up and was getting like 25 pounds of it, and selling it from, or, ordering it from the retail meat case at a commercial grocery chain. And so, I mean, people are looking at options and even, if one was to buy obviously a quarter of beef is a lot larger difference than even saying the one lamb or one goat or whatever that may be. Several questions, Jeremy said, at least looked at the summer slump. And I guess, as we think about it and prognosticating, one of the differences is that we can say, okay, there's less of those obviously sheep and goats available right now. More of them will be available. But hopefully what I envision is that slump or that economic trough is a lot less pronounced. Does that make sense? And I think we've kind of discussed that, and I know Fred has as well, is that even though if prices were to suppress somewhat, that at least we're still able to keep it up at a good spot. And some of the times, even on a sheep standpoint right now, is that truthfully, we would be getting rid of those old crop lambs and not into some of the new crop lambs. And so there's a transition period as well there. But would you care to say, Jeremy, that at least, like we said, seasonally, maybe there's not as large of fluctuations now and potentially in 2022 as there was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right?
Yep. And it's all going to depend on supply and demand. Obviously, regionally based, we may get flooded with ewes, and right now we got a lot of ewes coming to market, and the price is getting challenging some weeks compared to the levels that we have been at, but they're still potentially 5 to 10 years ago record highs for the years. So we're still kind of hitting them plateaus. I don't think the bottom is going to be as bad as it has been, just because we're at the levels that we are. I mean, they're potentially going to scale back, and I believe they will. They're not going to scale back to levels that we'd seen seasonally lows with the ewes being under 40 to 50, 60 cents, and them 50-pound lambs or 60-pound lambs dropping to under $2 a pound. I don't believe that's going to happen, just the way the environment that we're kind of in. But they probably will suppress the more volume that we do get around, because there'll be big runs all around the country, and everybody will have we'll have a lot to market at a certain point in time of the year, coming through the summer months and in the early fall.
An interesting question here, and I think it makes sense in my mind, it seems moved on me. It seems that it's hard to find a true market price for feeder kids, 30 to 40 pound weaned kids. And that 100% makes sense to me, because then you don't know what that 40 pound one is. And think of the price per pound that people have to pay. And then if they were going to feed it to a higher weight, pay $6 a bushel corn or whatever it may be, or $7, or who knows where we're going to end up there in terms of just the feeder kids. And so that's an interesting spot, right? I mean, some of those like young ones, they got to go somewhere and get fed a little bit longer, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say probably the threshold, the cutoff is probably that 45 to 50 pound range is probably where I'd say. That's why I try to encourage a lot of my producers. You kind of got to get them to them levels if you want to try to get the most bang for your buck or get the most dollars ahead back in return, and try to encourage them to get it there. Now, granted, we do have some producers that sell them that way, and sometimes they have no choice but to move in that way, and we do have a few outlets to do that. But obviously, the high grain prices and high feed prices are dampening that the return to go back to the country to feed them and then try to resell them back. So.
Right. And as much sunshine and rainbows there is on the pricing side, and even as Justin knows, in terms of, looking at other commodity reports, is that the input costs, no matter whether that's fuel or feed or wages, are something that's important to keep into consideration. That's not the topic that we're going to finish on this evening, but input costs are something that we need to manage, because even though the prices are higher, we are well aware that the other side of our ledger is also kind of higher as well. One of the things is that was touched on here was kind of imported product. And then if, the butcher shops are backed up and they need lamb and or goat, that they can, purchase the frozen imported lamb. And it says, why as a farmer do I want to fight that problem? And in fact, I think that it's important to realize that competition is not new to either the sheep or goat industry. And we have different shops here and that people could purchase, sometimes lamb, but sometimes goat and camel and whatever that may be, that can fit their worlds. But imported product, a lot of times imported product is what's there. Australia, in relation to sheep and goats, is a very large competitor. New Zealand is a competitor in also in the lamb, in particular in racks and loins that you might find in a Costco or something similar. And so those options do exist for people to purchase. The challenge is that even if, and to describe this first off from lamb, and then secondly in terms of goat, is that if we were to provide all of the U.S. Produced lamb to be the supplier for Costco, we would run out. Okay, and so realize that even when we think about how many sheep are in the back of behind Justin's right shoulder there in the semi truck, is that we do not have enough. And so there has to be something in terms of entry level, that there's still some positives of people consuming lamb And maybe the next time they're like, you know what, maybe I want to consume American. And the same thing can be said for goats as well. And a lot of times that's cube to goat. Sometimes you can get retail cuts, but we want to get people that are out there, and we know are very certain that the supply of goats in the United States is not nearly enough to get the individuals that want to purchase it. So there's certainly some value in there. So the questions is in comparison to imports, yes, it's a challenge, but I don't see it as our largest challenge by any means, because there's a reason that supply and demand is pushing this. Okay, and so there's options, and again, there are some grain and grass-fed options that can be labeled as you so chose. You can decide as we think about it quickly from labeling of this, is that people could say that it's natural, or it's antibiotic free, or it's grass fed, or it's organic. But Fred, the difference is that, research would commonly say that no matter what label you want to put on it, if I know where that animal comes from, and I can say that, you know what, this was harvested at Fred's location, or even came from, Jeremy's auction barn, and making those direct connections as well, holds value to people. And so I appreciate, Jeremy, for kind of providing a location and a resource, and offering those for sale. And like you said, you serve a purpose for those producers, because right now, anybody that wants to purchase lamb or goat, that those people want to be there at the auction barn. People might be able to direct sell them, and we like working with those people, and they like making those connections, but you provide more people to give a fair market price. And so thank you for what you do. Justin is kind enough to pull all this together so that all of our economists and truthfully producers and have access to those. Again, you should have had links to kind of where some of those market reports are for both lamb and for goats. And Fred does a great job as well of kind of pulling some of the thought process together and realizing, and I wanted Fred to be involved in this so that we can realize that the paradigm does shift, and that we have options to make that happen. So, I mean, we know that we can be able to connect with those people and connect with lots of people that want to consume lamb, want to consume goat, and be able to merchandise that. And so when we think about it for marketing, we have a lot of good things. Jeremy, will you provide us just kind of a quick summary? What are your closing thoughts? We've had lots of questions, and we've done our best to catch as many as we could here, and appreciate all of our tremendous audience that's came to join us. Jeremy, what's your closing thoughts as we think about it from sheep and goat marketing, and how it's had an impact on Zumbrota livestock?
I mean, it's a big part of our operation. Obviously, we've kind of got a great buyer support that are coming to support our markets. Great customer base that keeps supporting Central Livestock as their marketing firm to market their sheep and goats through. We've got great relationships with people that have been customers with Central Livestock for 50 some odd years, going way back to the South St. Paul days. They just entrusted Central Livestock to market their lambs and ewes and goats for them, and we've got a great customer base and buyer base that are coming to buy them, and I think the outlook looks good. It's been good years. I hope a lot of these sheep and goat producers keep trying to capitalize on it. There's been good years to be making some money in the sheep and goat industry, and I think we got some good years ahead of us yet here too. So.
Jeremy, what does it cost as a producer to bring sheep and or goat through your sale ring?
So if you want to market it through our Tuesday auction, it'd be $12.25 per head. Obviously we do all the sorting. If you bring it in the night before, we'll try to give it some hay and water and try to take care of the animals the best that we possibly can. We do offer a private treaty option for you. If you want more of a guaranteed price, if you had a bigger group of lambs or ewes or something that you wanted a little more guaranteed price on, definitely call us at the office or talk to me, and we'll try to get something lined up for you in the weeks that coming ahead. And we do have some producers that take advantage of that, and they like doing that. So we try to put buyer and seller together the best we possibly can, and try to accommodate every producer, because not every producer likes to go through the auction, and some other producers like to know what they're getting. So we're here to accommodate everybody, and try to do the best that we possibly can to bring buyer and seller together. So.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very, very, very much, Jeremy, on providing your insight. Justin, and in fact, a question comes in, but I have some thoughts as well. And this can be available in terms of the numbers of people of how many sheep or how many goats that they have. And that is USDA data. One of the inquiries says, what is the size range of goat raisers? And I will just give you the generalization. You can echo it if you wish. As well. But, particularly, I've got the opportunity to work with at North Dakota State University and the University of Minnesota Extension. But most of the people that have sheep or goats, and Jeremy touched on that, don't have very many. All right. And so they're not going to be the ones that are going to pull the trailer load together. And some of the more common sizes would still be 20 to 30 goats, or even 20 to 30 lambs as well. Justin, do you have any particular input, and then kind of how your market reports helps to serve our industry?
You bet. Absolutely, Travis. I agree fully. So it really seems like to me, in my experience in my career, that most sheep producers would be on the smaller size, especially back here in the Midwest. So that's where guys like Jeremy that run a livestock auction, price discovery that's where it's found, and it's so important, it's vital. And that's where our USDA reports come into play, because like everyone knows in the sheep industry, the sheep auctions are getting fewer and fewer, further and farther away from each other as well. So like we're seeing down here in southeast South Dakota, we see sheep and goats coming from really a 5-state region. And so people just have to go that much further. But yet, like you say, there's a lot of demand for sheep and goats right now. It's really what an exciting time to be in this industry, to be watching, to see what's happening. It looks like there's an awful lot of optimism yet still. So whether you're a small producer or a large producer, you got to have information. And that's what our goal at USDA is, to provide unbiased information. And part of that, if you go to our USDA Market News website, we've also developed a new Market News mobile app for be used on smartphones to help access these reports, quickly and easily. And you could also find historical stuff. That's really so much, as you know as well, Travis, is tracking these markets on a historical basis, so we can make some projections for the future, so we can kind of make a plan for the road ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And in fact, even as we discussed there, again, my focus, at least historically, more so comes from the sheep industry. And now as I continue to evolve, some of the goats, and in fact, there was a quick comment there that USDA, and even as the numbers that I shared of the LMIC data, is that we don't have as much information in relation to who has goats or where those goats are, and particularly here in the upper Midwest. And so as we continue to gather more information, and we continue to gather more information in terms of price discovery, then that will help us to be better in terms of transparency. But Justin, I appreciate everything you do, because the market that does happen, you guys help to get it to everybody so that they knows what happens, and can be able to competitively market their animals, and then also learn where their animals are in terms of the range of the game too, because we want to always kind of be the sale topper. It's a lot more fun to be the person at the top setting the marks, right, Jeremy? So, but Fred, your portion in this webinar is absolutely imperative as well, as we continue to kind of discuss and talk about the evolution and the changes of the paradigms that we have in the sheep and goat industry. And Fred, and so what are the quick things that you've seen, there, and that you feel as though that we have some optimism and some brightness to the future? Because I'm an eternal optimist, so I commonly get ridiculed for that. But I think, Fred, that you certainly see some of the bonuses and are there firsthand. Are we going to be okay in the sheep and goat industry post 2022?
Oh, I think so. I mean, the people that like goat, especially, they like goat. They don't want to go away from it. And one thing that I found that they are going towards is heavier weight butchers. So maybe that'll help too, as far as the supply end.
Okay, and so like you said, I mean, there's lots of people that do want to consume goat and goat meat, and also lamb, and different than at least my palate allows. Justin, they certainly like to enjoy mutton as well with the CULU prices. And so a lot of that's getting marketed and merchandised as well. And so I think that it's an important thing, and at least as I describe it and think of it big picture. And again, my family, I grew up in South Dakota on a sheep operation, but a lot of the things is knowing more about our end product. And that's what I'm so excited to have the opportunity and to host these webinars through the University of Minnesota and NDSU Extension is that we get to know more about what happens to the animals when they leave our location as well. And maybe that's my excitement and training in terms of meat sciences, but we want to, again, make that connection. And as you guys either purchase or provide products that you may get to take home and put on your dinner plate, realize that you have the opportunity to also to feed the world. And I do mean that sincerely, and I do mean that passionately for all of our producers that we have that joined us, is that you make an impact. And whether it's an exciting day that you sold the animal at the top of the market, or a challenging day because you had to pay the fuel prices and the fertilizer costs for the crops, realize that I appreciate what you do, and the University of Minnesota Extension that helps to host these webinars. We want to be a resource for you as we think about it on sheep and goat production, and we're pulling together our functions for the upcoming ones, and we will also be working for a dairy goat tour and doing a dairy goat producer tour. If you are following and stay up with myself and what I get to do in North Dakota State University, we are hosting a local foods webinar that will be a 5-part series. And then I also have, through the American Lamb Board and Premier One Supplies, a video series that's pulling together lamb quality and USDA yield grade and quality grade and interpretation. So we look forward to your future involvement. If you've been on here, we will get these up on the YouTube channel that is on the Minnesota Sheep and Goat Extension Team's YouTube channel. And thanks again for our panelists. And thank you to my colleagues that are still on here and joining us. Wayne Martin, Colleen Carlson, Brenda Miller, Emma, Troy Sulzer, and also Emma as well for joining us. And I appreciate everything that you guys do, and it kind of pulled that together. Of Emma Severance has helped pull us together as well. So thanks to our panelists. Thanks to our team at the University of Minnesota, and we are driven to discover, and at NDSU, we extend knowledge and change lives. So live the dream, eat lots of lamb, eat lots of goat, and have a happy holiday season, a spring holiday season as well. Charge on. Thanks so much for joining us.